And joining me to talk about it right now, Nate Bauer, Blue White Illustrated. Always appreciate his time as well as, hey, look, that's a tough game, Nate. I'm going to blame Penn State for starting my day off a little shaky on a park your ass Saturday, where we all wanted to sit around and watch college football all day because it's Separation Saturday. And I said, man, I can't wait to watch Penn State and Michigan. Yeah. And even though I knew what the score was at halftime, we all knew this game was over. That was a physical butt whooping, Nate. Talk to me. Did anybody at Penn State see this coming?
I don't know about to that extent. Certainly, I don't think that the final score was something that anybody at Penn State expected. But the notion that Penn State's linebackers would have trouble defending the run, or that Penn State's front seven defensively in general would struggle, that Michigan might be able to dictate the terms of the game, that Penn State offensive line would have trouble, right, creating time, and that the receivers would create separation for themselves. Yeah, I think that those are things that Penn State is aware of its flaws to a certain extent. Many of the opponents that Penn State has faced so far this season were not equipped to expose them. Michigan is. Michigan, right? Like, so Purdue can throw the ball. They can't run. Auburn can run the ball. They can't throw. Everybody else that Penn State has played, Northwestern is a train wreck, Central Michigan and Ohio, they don't really count, right? And so you have this storyline of Penn State has been able to do, for the most part, what it has wanted to do through the first 5 games of the season because of the flaws of its opponents. Michigan doesn't have those flaws. And so straight up, Michigan was very, very much able to expose the weaknesses that Penn State has. And more important, Penn State had no counter. Penn State doesn't have another move to be able to take Michigan off of that trajectory.
You wrote it, Nate, Blue White Illustrated. I told everybody at the outset where it was they can find your work, but I'm going to read a paragraph from your piece after this game because I think it's fitting. Quote, in a game pitting contrasting styles against one another, Michigan was Michigan and Penn State, unbeaten and eager for an opportunity to prove itself on a national stage, was nowhere to be found. This is a criticism of James Franklin. It's a criticism. I point to people all the time and I say, listen, don't use records against ranked top 5 teams, top 10 teams as a way of illustrating that a guy is or is not something. Most people on the road against top 5 teams don't have a winning record.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, it's a dumb thing to do when you say, hey, they've lost 5 straight or 6 straight to a top 5 team on the road. Yeah, everybody does, man. Most people lose. Yeah. But that said, this was exceptionally poor. I saw James Franklin's post-game press conference. He looked a little ashen. Yeah. I think this was a stunning turn of events in the sense that, and you just described it aptly, they were physically dismantled. Where do you go from here after a game like that? Because, I mean, you tell me, my guess is that Penn State fans, Penn State players, and to some degree Penn State coaches certainly probably thought this could be the winner of the Big Ten, meaning Penn State could be that good. Now we know, resoundingly so, they're not.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because nobody thought that going into the season, right? Like, just to be fair, nobody had Penn State winning the Big Ten. Okay, bottom line. Competing in the Big Ten East was certainly, given the records and what they've done the last couple of years, was an aspiration. That was something, that was a place that the program wanted to get back to. They got to it. They got to that place where they could be in that game without having suffered a loss, right? They got past Purdue in a tough environment on the road. They got past Auburn, who has its own problems, admitted, but they were able to pass those tests. Now, the issue for Penn State is that they're not on the level of what Michigan represents, what Ohio State represents. This week becomes, I cannot stress, monumentally important for Penn State. Monumentally, because the question is Penn State in that, right, just off tier where it's right? You got that clear pecking order of Ohio State, Michigan, and then the next one is Penn State there, or Is Penn State not? Is Penn State somewhere in the middle of the pack with the rest of the conference? And so, I mean, I think that Minnesota at Beaver Stadium, it is gut check time for Penn State. They need to figure out who they are, what they want to be. I think defensively that they know, right? I think, frankly, offensively, they know what they want to be. I don't know if they have the personnel to achieve what they'd like to be. And so it's a figure it out process, right? You either have to turn and say, hey, we don't have it, cannot compete with everyone that they're going to face. Or do you say, hey, Michigan is on another level. Michigan and Ohio State, they are what they are. We can be this against the overwhelming majority of the rest of the Big Ten. And I think, frankly, I think that that's the answer, is most of the teams that Penn State is going to face on the schedule from here on out, including Minnesota, and certainly all of the games after Ohio State, Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland, and Michigan State, they all have some fatal flaws themselves, right? Like these are winnable games for Penn State. Sure. And so, but you have to assert that. And so Penn State has had many, it's a long history, specifically under James Franklin, of struggling after the first loss of the season. When they hit this high, right, they come in unbeaten and they've had this success and then lose that first game. They have a terrible record in the game after that. This one's important. They got to get past Minnesota, because if they don't, you're looking at a 3-game slide going into November, which totally upends any of the aspirations that they've had as a program this season.
Final thing here, I'm kind of curious, big picture stuff, Nate, for everybody watching around the country that tunes in to the recap and we go through the top 25. I always find it interesting and fun to cover, quite frankly. I've done it several times in my own career. I know you're doing it now. When a program is trying to get back to the elite status, when they're trying to become national championship contenders, college football playoff contenders these days, really the last thing to take hold most of the time is the line of scrimmage. And this was a game where the line of scrimmage was dominated by the other side. And that's what Ohio State and Michigan can do to people in the Big Ten. We see that a lot. You feel like, I mean, you got 2 dynamic running backs at Penn State. Everybody has watched those guys play. But if you can't block, you're not going to be able to make that next leap and go ahead and utilize that skill set against the better teams. How close is, I guess my question, how close is Penn State at the line of scrimmage? I'm talking about the recruiting and what they've done to this point. Clearly, they weren't there yesterday. But how close are they to getting there? Okay, so that's the part.
Yeah, I think certainly the defensive line has had more success than the offensive line. They have put out pretty, especially edge rushers. They've had a string of them. They have another one in with denied Dennis Sutton. Like that, Adisa Isaac has been pretty good this year. Chop Robinson, it might be one of the best transfer portal additions anybody's picked up over the offseason. So the defensive line has they got some stuff to figure out, specifically at defensive tackle. It is kind of what it is in PJ Mustafa. He's coming off of an ACL. You got to squeeze as much juice out of him as you possibly can. They have some horses in the stable on the defensive line. The offensive line is a conundrum for James Franklin for 9 years. That is the truth. It has not really been. The question to me is less, is it something that they can turn into a dominant presence? It's less that than it is, can you make it serviceable? Can it be good enough, or can you figure out the other pieces that you need, right? Can you figure out a quarterback who is able to keep defenses honest, either by stretching the field, which means they need a receiver that they don't presently have on the roster. Okay, that doesn't exist. In Sean Clifford, they haven't had that for the most part for the last 3 years. They haven't had a guy who can escape pressure, who can make an accurate throw while under duress. It hasn't existed in him. Is Drew Allar that guy? I don't know. Right. And so it's not just the offensive line. The offensive line is not there and does not appear to me to be close to getting there in terms of dominance. But can it get to a place where it's serviceable? Yeah, I think so. Yesterday made it very clear that, and James Franklin said this going into the game, Michigan was going to, and this is what Michigan does. Michigan was going to dictate the terms of the game. Okay. Yeah. If Michigan is picking up 5 yards every first down and finds itself in second and short, third and short consistently, it's going to have success moving the ball. They did that, right? Penn State buckled down in the red zone and forced 4 field goals. That wasn't an anomaly. That's what Penn State's defense does. But eventually the dam breaks, right? Yeah. Michigan's offensive line opens up enough holes, and their running backs go nuts. They have 67-yard runs. That's what Penn State wants to do. Penn State wants to be able to hit home runs like Michigan did, and like Michigan ultimately won the game with yesterday. They're just not there. They just don't have that ability, especially when a team like Michigan can stack the box and totally snuff out the run the way that they did.
Nate, next time I talk to you about Penn State in a big game, we won't have to describe Sean Clifford yet again. We'll be able to talk about somebody else in all likelihood, and we'll be moving forward with a different discussion. And maybe the line of scrimmage will be there, and it's not 418 yards rushing or whatever. You know, it's an interesting thing. A lot of schools, listen, everybody wants to be in the top 4. It's hard to get there. It's hard to get there. It takes a long time, and usually it is, as you've described, an uphill battle to get the hosses needed at the line of scrimmage. I appreciate you getting up early with us today and coming back and doing this interview. As always, your insights appreciated. You can read Nate's stuff, Blue White Illustrated. Be well, good sir.
Hey, you got it. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, Nate.